Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar Top 10 video. This one's going to be my top 10 underappreciated episodes of Avatar and Korra. So, brief intro to this topic. Obviously, there are a lot of episodes that are, in general, by the fandom, treated really well. Like, they're considered the best of both series. There's also a lot of episodes that I think in general are just treated as the worst of both series. And some of those will perhaps appear on this list as I get into it. Some of those episodes that I feel the fandom on the whole doesn't treat as well as they should. And this is just a lot of episodes where I feel that are just middle ground that I'm like, why aren't we talking about this episode some more? So it's the kind of those last two things I mentioned, just those episodes that people don't rate too highly that I think are actually really good, plus the middle ground episodes that I don't understand why people don't like as much, and that are going to be on this list. That's what they're the type of episodes I'm talking about here. Now, this one's going to work a little bit differently than previous videos in that when I came to make the list, I couldn't really form it too hard into a proper, top 10, like, this is the 10th most underappreciated episode, this is the most underappreciated episode. So instead what I did was I just did basically lists of like, here's 5 episodes from Avatar I consider are underrated and 5 from Korra that are underrated. None of them are in order. Maybe I'll mention when I come to a certain episode if I think it's particularly like badly treated or anything like that. But for the most part, there's not much of an order here. I just did 5 from Korra, 5 from Avatar, and that's what you're going to see as we get into the rest of this video. At the end of the video, I'll announce the top 10 video I'm going to be doing next Wednesday. Yeah, let's get into the list. We'll start with Avatar episodes I feel are underappreciated, and we'll start with 201, The Avatar State. This is an episode that I don't think people think it's a bad episode, but it's an episode I rarely, if ever, see people talk about all that much. But for me, I think it's a really important episode. I think it is underappreciated just because it's not talked about as much as it perhaps should be. This is the episode where the whole Avatar State plotline really begins. You see Aang basically having dreams about what he did during Siege of the North, basically, not in control of the Avatar State. You see how the rest of the world, now that the Avatar is back, kind of sees the Avatar, that he should just go into the Avatar State and kind of rampage and just destroy the Fire Nation. Just use him as a weapon. And then you have this kind of other side of things where, you kind of have Katara's opinion on the situation, where she doesn't think it should just be used like that because she cares about Aang as a person, and so she doesn't like seeing him like that, and just the way that the general kind of uses Katara against Aang to force him into the Avatar State, but doesn't realize that the Avatar State, when activated, doesn't really think that much. It's like, okay, the Avatar is in danger emotionally or physically, take out the threat, regardless of if they're a quote-unquote bad guy or a good guy. And so you have that whole thing happen. And the important part of this episode, of course, is what Roku explains about the Avatar State, that it's where the Avatar is most powerful. He explains more specifics about what it is, but also explains that it's where the Avatar is at their most vulnerable, because if they're killed in the Avatar State, the Avatar cycle is gone forever. So it presents this kind of double-edged sword situation for the Avatar State, which explains why you don't see Aang use it in every fight, and I think that works out really well. So I think it's an important episode that not that I think people hate the episode or anything like that, it's just, why aren't more people talking about this episode? It's really good. Next up is The Beach from Season 3. This is an episode that has complete mixed reactions. Some people love this episode, some people hate this episode and consider it one of the worst of the series, and some people just don't mind it. I personally think it's a really good episode, and I don't really get why people despise this episode. I can maybe understand it's like, well, it's not the best episode, we don't talk about it so much, but I don't understand people in the camp that are just like, this is a bad episode. To me, this is a really important episode where you characterize the villains out of the context of them fighting the heroes. Because you get good Mei characterization here, good Ty Lee characterization here. It's one of the only episodes in the entire series where we get Azula kind of acting casually, where she's not just trying to be Azula, the calculating villain or stuff like that. She is just trying to be a person, and you see all of the flaws that she has because of the way that she was raised. Like there's some really big moments with Azula, just the fact that she has to ask Ty Lee for advice on something, that's big. And what it's about is this normal kind of teenage thing of just, how to talk to boys, that she has to get that advice from Ty Lee, because Ty Lee is more of a normal person in the universe compared to Azula. And so that's really interesting, that she's really, in a way, kind of, I suppose, vulnerable in this just fairly standard social situation, because even though she's really powerful and used to commanding like whole armies and stuff like that, this is the sort of stuff that she's not good at. And then, most powerful of all, I think, is obviously the campfire scene at the end, where they all sit down and talk, and you get the whole thing of Ember Island, heals, it smooths over flaws, it allows you to kind of get all this stuff out. And so, they all have these little moments, they all get angry. May shows a lot of emotion for one of the only times in the series. You see little bits of, Ty Lee's issues come out about her siblings and stuff like that, which is going to be addressed in the Free Comic Book Day comic coming up in just about 2 weeks. Zuko has one of his most important moments here, where he reveals to everyone that he's angry at himself. And it's a really important step on his journey to basically realizing, even though he's back in the Fire Nation and he thinks this should be his place, it's not. So that's important, and just in terms of May and Zuko's relationship, that really helps, and that they both see this other side of each other. And then Azula also has another important moment here, where she basically honestly talks about how she feels about her relationship with her mother, which is something that I assume will be referenced again when Azula comes back into the comics. So I think it's a really important episode. Yes, it's a little bit odd, I suppose, in terms of its placement. It's just like middle of the getting towards the middle of the last season, and we decide to take this kind of break episode just to focus on this beach party and our villains relaxing. But it's an important episode just to get that almost complete focus on the villains. Next episode, The Headband. Again, it's an episode that I think people in general like. I don't really see people dislike it so much. The one thing maybe bad you can say about it is that it usually is one that ends up lower on people's list. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think it is a really good episode, once again. It's really important for maybe reasons you don't quite understand, but I think it's often just considered, this is that dancing episode, this is the one where Aang goes to school. And yes, it's that, and yes, there's some funny moments, this is Wang Fire, this is the Sapphire Fire episode, Aang acting as Kuzan. But to me, the important stuff here is just, you get to see what Fire Nation kind of culture is like, what the Fire Nation school system is like. They're lying about their history. They're feeding the youth, basically, lies about actual stuff that happened. They're making the Fire Nation seem like the good guys in every situation, when in fact they were the ones who caused these problems in the first place. And that's why there is no kind of internal thing within the Fire Nation actually going against them. Because everyone growing up just learns that everything that the Fire Nation did was for the good. And so you see Aang come in there, and he's a complete contrast. He hasn't been kind of indoctrinated by the school yet, and you just see how he changes the people around him. And so, you have this whole thing about freedom of expression come out, and it's really interesting just by the end of the episode that the impact that he has on everyone else. And you sort of wonder, if we ever got to see those characters again, would they really be changed by Aang? Are these going to be the people that basically help make the Fire Nation as we go into the comics from here on out? And then in Korra time, are they like the older characters now who are making the Fire Nation a better place? So it's an important episode in that sense. Plus, it's a really good episode for Katara and Aang's relationship with the dance. It's a really good step in their relationship. So, important episode there, really early on in the season. Not the best, but I think it's underrated. Next up, The Painted Lady. Obviously, the episode that follows The Headband. This is definitely one of those episodes where I know there's a couple of people, out there who really like the episode, like myself. But in general, I see a lot of people say this is one of the worst of the series. And it's for weird reasons. I've yet to really see someone go, oh, look, this is a bad episode, let me prove it to you. Here's why. most of the time I just see people be like, oh, Painted Lady, yeah, it wasn't a great episode, don't like Katara in the episode, another one of those Katara Hope speech episodes, and yeah, this weird environmental issue, that was awful. And I'm just like, why was the environmental plot awful? Like, really? Like, why? I really don't get that as a criticism of this episode. That it addresses the Fire Nation basically not caring for the environment. It's not like Avatar heavily hits you over the head constantly about like pollution and stuff like that. This is basically one of the only episodes where it's actually brought up, but it is a subtle theme about the Fire Nation in the entire series that they do basically go too heavy on the technology and polluting stuff. They're not spiritual. They're all about this machinery that basically destroys nature. And this is like the only episode where it's actually addressed. And I think it's important that there was at least one episode that focused somewhat heavily on that. And so I really appreciate it for this. Like, you have this place on the river, and it's obviously ruined effectively. Their life, their fishing village is ruined by the fact there's a Fire Nation factory nearby. And it's obviously the environmental stuff, but it's also like another good episode to kind of characterize what's the real enemy within the Fire Nation. That being that it's not the people, all people within the Fire Nation, it's just the military. That the military is so bad that they're even hurting their own people. Like, this town that they go to in this episode is a Fire Nation town, and they're suffering just as much as some of the other nations by the fault of their own military. And so that's an important thing that you actually have in this series, and it was important very early on in season 3 to get that across. Who are the true villains? Who are our team actually fighting against? And this is an important episode to show you that it's not the people, it's just the military. And then the other thing about this episode is I would consider this one of, if not, well, it's not the strongest Katara episode, that's the Southern Raiders, but I would consider this probably the second or third strongest Katara episode in the entire series. Probably 3. I think the desert's probably her second strongest one. But really good episode for her. I think it does a lot come down to the line that she says to Sokka, I will never ever turn my back on people who need me. It was so important that she said that argument with Sokka, and ultimately the fact that even though she's kind of at fault here, she's in the wrong, she was completely correct in what she did. And Sokka understanding that was important. That he kind of lost track in the whole schedule thing of the fact that what got him to this position was helping the people they came across. And the reason that they're going to have support in the upcoming invasion is because they met all these people. They helped them. They formed these connections. And so, really good episode in that sense. I just, yes, it's not one of the best of the entire series. I think it's strong because of the characterization and the stuff it deals with, but I don't get the whole I hate environmental issue things. I don't get that at all. And I don't really buy into the whole, Katara's really annoying in most of the episodes she's in. Not really at all. So there's that. Final Avatar The Last Airbender episode, of course, The Great Divide. By its very definition, it's the worst rated episode of Avatar The Last Airbender. It is underappreciated. And the reason I have this on my list, and it's the last one I want to talk about, is because I honestly think this is a good episode. Like, I don't put any episode of Avatar into the bad category. This is a solid episode. Yes, I still agree it is one of the lower rated episodes in the entire series. It's probably second or third bottom for me, but it's not worst. And the reason for that is because I think it's actually a really interesting episode, which I know a lot of people don't agree with. They even made a joke about it in the show that it's not the most interesting episode. But here's the thing, it is interesting because it deals with stuff that isn't addressed ever again in the series. And that is the 2 tribes in the episode. They never come up again. We never really get the full story about them. But you're always interested throughout to find out what this whole thing was actually about. This idea that these 2 tribes are feuding over their history, yet it's a history that neither tribe actually knows about. They both have this kind of very biased kind of view on what happened in history. No, you slighted us. No, you slighted us. And so this idea that Aang can just say, oh, actually, I was from this time, I knew the leaders of your two tribes, what this story that you're talking about was actually just this thing, and they believe him, says a lot about this whole feud, in that it's just this idea that they're holding grudges in a time of war and really kind of not helping either tribe because of this, and their whole fight is over something they really don't know about, their own history. And so, yes, you're kind of like, oh my god, Aang, you just did something really awful there by like ruining their history, but at the same time, they didn't know their own history and they were willing to fight each other to the death because of that. And then it just presents this interesting thing by the end of the episode. What actually did happen? Like, I really want to know the origin of the two tribes. I want to know the exact story that took place. What was this orb they were carrying? What was the whole ritual that this thing was about? Where is that orb right now? Isn't important. Will it ever come back? It seemed like it was something that was meant to be come back at some point. But there's that. The other part of this episode I do find interesting in that it is the first episode where Aang really has to do something as the Avatar in terms of solving a conflict between people, the role of the Avatar. These two groups is the first time he's called into action in that way. And the idea that this episode deals with this concept of the Avatar has to be neutral and he can't pick sides, yet Katara and Sokka do pick sides in the argument, and so they even go against Aang there, and they don't really help him in that situation. He's left on his own with the Canyon Guide to advise him, and that, like, as the Canyon Guide, he has to be neutral to everyone who comes to be guided across the canyon, and so they can kind of relate on that, and you know the idea of just like it's hard being neutral because you have to be on your own while everyone else chooses sides. That was actually a really cool thing, I think, for Aang to learn in the episode. It wasn't the most important piece of characterization ever in the series, but it was solid enough. And that's why I think Mike and Brian almost did a discredit to this episode by making that joke in the Ember Island Players about it. Let's just skip it. Because I don't think this is an episode you should skip in a rewatch. I think watch this episode again, but actually take an interest in what's going on here. Think about the concept of these two tribes. Where do they come from? They're obviously kind of refugee tribes at this point in time. Like, where are they actually from? Are they Earth Kingdom tribe? From somewhere else? Like, really think about like where they are, and especially in like Korra time now, when we know all about these different states. Like, what are these tribes about? Like, how old are these tribes? There's a lot of stuff about the Great Divide. It's super interesting. But yeah, let's move into the underappreciated Korra episodes now. First one I want to talk about is Skeletons in the Closet. And this is an episode, like, in general, I think people really like this episode. I want to say that. But again, I think like this is one of the top episodes in the entire series. And I just question why no one ever really seems to talk about it. I know in general Book 1 doesn't seem to be talked about all that much. But to me, this episode is just that one episode from Book 1 that's just like, why is no one talking about this? This is like an amazing episode. It's the one episode where we get to know the villains of a season so well that it makes you really care about them. The backstory for Amon and Noatok was just Noatok and Tarlok was just amazing to see, and just how it connected the whole season together. Yakone from Aang's past, his sons are now the kind of villains for the next Avatar. Like, that's a great connection in itself. And then his bloodbending ability was passed on to these two. That's why they're so powerful. The reason Amon got the mask was because bending ruined their family life, and it's such a tragic story for those two. And then you see like Tarlok captured by Amon, and he's kind of now wants to make amends. It's a really powerful episode, so I think it's one that needs to be talked about more and given the kind of treatment it deserves. Next up, The Southern Lights. Early Book 2 episode, again, it's just one of those things where, like, I know a lot of people know I really like Book 2. But it's not a case of me just liking it because other people don't like it. When these episodes first aired, you can go back and watch my reviews, like basically from like a day or two after the episodes actually aired, podcast as well. You can see I honestly liked these episodes when they first aired, and I think a lot of fans did as well. So I never got the whole I hate the first half of book two thing. I never understood really where it came from. Yes, the second half of book two is better than the first half, but this episode, specifically the Southern Lights, is one of the best episodes from the first half of book two, because it's the episode that connects most heavily with the second half of the book and makes all that spirit stuff happen. Because this is the episode where we get the Tarlok backstory. We get the whole thing with the barbarians and Unalaq, which we later learn, obviously, the barbarians were sent by Unalaq and stuff like that. So that's important. It continues that whole feud kind of early on in the book that Korra is having with kind of Tenzin and more specifically her father in this episode, Tonraq, and it's a really kind of interesting position that she's in that, you know, her uncle is presenting this kind of situation where he's presenting all these bad decisions that her father made, and he's just presenting nothing but good things that he can offer. And so you understand why Korra decides to go with Unalaq and learn from him, because he is the only one really there having any sort of faith in her at this point in time. And so she really needs that at the time that we meet Korra in this episode. Not to mention, she makes a really big step in her spiritual journey in this episode in unlocking that portal, even though it was kind of like manipulated by Unalaq to further his goals. It was still an important step that she connected spiritually and understood this stuff. And then by the end of the series, she keeps the portals open. So it was an overall good thing, because as much as you later find out that that was part of Unalaq's plan to have the two portals open, it was overall a good thing for the entire Avatar universe that the portals were open again. You could see that just from the fact that the portal wasn't meant to be frozen in this kind of like kind of ice, kind of tundra thing over it. It's meant to be the Southern Lights. It's meant to be this kind of beautiful thing, this place where the spirit world is connected to the physical world. And it wasn't that case until Korra did what she did. And so it's an important episode in that sense that Unalaq, the one thing he was right about was that the world did need to be a bit more spiritual. It had kind of lost the kind of care about the spirits. So I think this is an important episode, like really important, and I don't get why people don't like it. Next up, Civil Wars. Similar things. I'm including both episodes here as one pick because I think it's similar issues. I don't get why people don't like these episodes because, again, one of the themes of this book, especially the first half of the book, is family. And these two episodes cover that so heavily. Again, Civil Wars isn't just referring to the actual civil war between the North and Southern Water Tribe. It's literally, civil as in kind of like family type thing. These issues between the families. And so like these two episodes I think are really strong because they continue this whole issue that Korra's having with her father. And you really get that nice moment towards the end of, I think, the first part of the Civil Wars where Korra thinks that her father has gone to basically kidnap Unalaq. Then she finds out it wasn't him, he wasn't involved. And just the fact that she was even in any way suspicious of her father shows her the kind of errors of her ways. That the fact that she was willing to think her father could do this is a big thing, and she tries to make the apology. But throughout the episodes, you get basically, in my opinion, some of the best stuff between Korra and her parents. It's Senna's best episodes, Korra's mother, and some really good stuff between Korra and her father. The scene where Senna kind of explains the kind of her plan with Tonraq for their family and how Korra being the Avatar kind of changed things was really emotional. But also, there are other scenes about how you realise that they have kind of been overprotective of Korra, that it's kind of become a little bit of a negative with her, that she doesn't know a lot about the world because she was so protected. And you could see that in various points in these episodes, even going back to the Southern Lights. There's a point in the Southern Lights where Tonraq actually says something that's very anti-spirit to Korra. Like, it's not just, I don't like spirits, it's very, like, against spirits and against his daughter having any sort of relationship with the spirits. While Senna does this thing like, why do you have to get involved in this? You can just stay out. And Korra says, no, I'm involved because I'm the Avatar, basically. And just this idea that Korra's the Avatar. Her parents aren't. They know it's an important position, but they don't understand that Korra needs to be involved in all of this because she is the Avatar. That the world needs her, and it was just a nice thing that they felt like her kind of moving away would mean that she never needed them again. When in fact, it was the complete opposite. She'll always need them. It's just she doesn't need to be that protected. And then there's the whole thing with Tenzin, and you get the episode with Iki. I think is this one where she runs away. You get the Sky Bison Tea Party, and that's a really nice thing just between those two, because Tenzin's having issues with Kaya and Bumi, and through like the advice he gets from Iki, it allows him to improve his relationship with his own brother and sister. So that's a really strong thing about this episode as well, and I think it's a really solid episode. Like, to me, covering the bigger issue, the first part of book 2, the only problem I would have with it is just that episode 5 and 6. The episode is basically transitioning from the first part of the season to the second good half of the season are not great. 5 and 6 aren't great episodes. But 1, 2, 3, 4, awesome, in my opinion. So next up, we get to hit some. We'll finish off with some book 1 episodes from Korra. The Spirit of Competition. This is an episode, probably one of the most hated episodes of Korra, and I don't fully understand why. Like, I think a lot of people blame this episode for all of the romance problems that Korra as a series has had, when in reality, this is the one episode in book 1 that basically covers all of the romance. Like, there's little bits in other episodes, but primarily it's all contained within this. This is where the drama happens with the whole, kiss thing in the middle of the tournament and stuff like that. But this is also the episode that features the resolution of most of that issues. It creates the problem and solves it in the same episode. But I think it's really well written, unlike a lot of the other romance stuff, because you link in basically the team dynamic as they go through the tournament, the pro bending tournament, with the romantic dynamic, and how, Bolin and Korra have this apparent date and he thinks it went well. Bolin's the star of the next match. Mako and Korra are having like friction, so they're not working well together, and so Bolin gets to step up. Then all of them are having issues with each other after the kind of whole kiss moment, and they see each other, and none of them are working well together. Korra, obviously brings everyone together at the end and kind of makes them realize that, look, this is maybe our only chance to win this tournament. We've got to put this stuff aside, deal with it later, and focus on winning this thing. And so it's really just strong the way it's covered, because they don't just do drama for the sake of drama. They resolve a lot of the stuff here, and I think it's just a well-written episode, because the pro bending stuff, I really like it. I understand a lot of people don't, but I think it's well done. For me, the issues with the romance come in book 2, when they start to go, let's break up Mako and Korra without showing what their relationship is actually like. Let's put Mako and Asami back together for no apparent reason. That's the problem stuff. They made a mess in book 2, not in book 1. The book 1 romance, like, if you look back on it now, isn't actually that bad. So I really like The Spirit of Competition. The last one I want to mention is maybe an odd one, but like, again, it's an episode like, when do you ever hear people mention the name of this episode? The Voice in the Night. I rarely ever, I admit, I almost forgot that this was an episode too, but the second I hear those names, I'm just like, I know exactly what this episode is. This is the episode where Korra goes to confront Amon, and basically he kind of he beats her, and she is terrified, and it's such a powerful moment just to see kind of Korra like that, because the previous 3 episodes she's always been this really powerful character, like the best fighter in a particular scene, and so to see her just afraid was like really powerful. In addition to that, this is the start of the whole Korra Tarlok rivalry. He wants her on his task force, and ultimately, how he gets her is that he engineers this situation where Korra is put in front of the media, and he knows she's not going to work very well there. He knows that they're going to ask her these questions about questioning, her strength, questioning if she's afraid, and she's not the type of character who takes that well, and so she's basically pressured into a situation where she has to join the task force and has to take on Amon. And yes, it's a mistake. She makes a big mistake in trying to deal with this way too quickly. But seeing what happens from this at the end is really strong, where she has that scene with Tenzin where she just basically says that I'm scared, and then Tenzin is actually helping her through the situation. It's one of the first times you really see, I suppose, that connection between Korra and Tenzin and what they really kind of add to each other. I think it's a really strong episode. You know, a lot of the book one episodes, you look back on them and maybe just without actually having watched them in a while, you're like, they're maybe not the best episodes. But then you watch them again and they're really good. So The Voice in the Night, not an episode I hear talked about barely at all, but I think it's one of the strongest moments in book one. So yeah, that's been the video. It's been my top 10 underappreciated episodes of Avatar and Korra. Next week, the plan is just going to be basically top 10 worst episodes of Avatar: The Last Airbender and Korra. I'm probably going to do a similar thing where like I do the bottom 5 of Avatar, bottom 5 of Korra, right? Rather than trying to compile both lists together. But other than that, thanks for watching this video, and bye.